So one of the big questions in biology is, why don't we live forever? Maybe one day we will, but until we understand why we grow old and get diseases such as Alzheimer's, diabetes, cancer, cardiovascular disease, we will not have a chance to greatly extend our lifespan. One of the main reasons for this is that currently we address one disease at a time. And even though we have breakthroughs in, say, cardiovascular disease, other diseases such as Alzheimer's are rather recalcitrant, very difficult to, right now, to prevent and cure. And so what happens is that we have the decline in one disease and then another disease accelerates in its frequency. And we're not living much longer than we did 10,000 years ago, unfortunately. So really what we're trying to do as a field, us biologists who study aging, is to understand what's at the root cause of this decline that we all go through unless we're unlucky enough to die early. So one of the major theories that's been around really since the 1940s, 1950s is the idea that aging is caused by a decline in mitochondrial function. So what are mitochondria? Well, these, as many of you will have known from high school biology, are the bags within our cells that generate chemical energy. They do other things. They process fat and also allow us to make other molecules that allow for cells to grow. But really, for this topic, what we want to talk about is their role in making chemical energy called ATP. And I draw this like a bag with my hands. It's really just a double membrane. The inner membrane is ruffled, and there are lots of proteins within that bag that carry out these chemical reactions to make ATP and energy. Now, what's really interesting about mitochondria is that they're actually another organism living within each of our cells. And unlike the textbooks, there isn't just one or two mitochondria per cell. There's hundreds, in some cases thousands of these. And they're not just single bags, they're actually networks, and we're learning that they divide and then they fuse, and then the cell can destroy the bad ones and improve the healthy ones. There are some unfortunate people throughout the world who have mitochondrial diseases, and when the mitochondria don't function well from birth, patients tend to have a number of neurological diseases, traits. There are other loss of muscle functions as well. So mitochondria are critical for life. We know that. In fact, if you poison the mitochondria, say with cyanide, you'd be dead within about 30 seconds. So we really need to understand not just how mitochondria function, but how to keep them healthy throughout our life. And one of the main theories of aging is that over time, well, we start out young and there's lots of mitochondria and they're healthier and they know how to function, they make lots of energy, we feel great, we've got energy, we can run, we can fight off diseases, our brain functions well, we can remember, and we don't get diabetes, we don't have dysfunctional muscles, for example. But over time, let's say people like me who are now midlife, we are starting to lose our mitochondrial function. That's a fact. And then by the time we're in our 60s and 70s, it's even worse. And an 80 to 90-year-old will have much, much lower mitochondrial function and they'll have less ATP. And this is a problem. And we scientists think that one of the major causes of diseases during aging is caused by this loss of the ability of our cells to make energy. Now, as I mentioned, mitochondria are free-living organisms in our cells. They joined our cells about 2 billion years ago. They were originally what are called alpha proteobacteria. We find these free-living bacteria right now in the world, but they're genetically related and functionally related to our own mitochondria. And what's important is that these mitochondria have their own DNA. They brought their own genome with them when they joined our cells to make eukaryotes. And today they still have many of those genes in their genome. The other genes that used to be in that genome, it's a circular genome, have been transferred to the nucleus. And so we're really just a mishmash of two species living together. And the genomes exist separately, but they need to communicate very well together to maintain their coexistence and be healthy. And later I'll tell you that one of the problems with aging might be that these two genomes within our cells lose the ability to communicate. But first I want to tell you about an older theory of aging that still holds some weight, but what we're starting to think is that this is more of a later stage of aging. So back in the 1940s and 50s, I was telling you that the mitochondrial theory of aging was born. And that's the idea that during metabolism, there's a lot of free radicals, or we call these reactive oxygen species, that can damage macromolecules. The idea is that as the mitochondria, when we're young, are functioning, they're producing these free radicals that damage the enzymes, and particularly the DNA within the mitochondria. And over time, we start to lose the code that's in our mitochondrial DNA. We get mutations, we get big deletions. So for example, if we took my DNA from pretty much any cell, except perhaps my germ cell,